Hi, I'm Susan Evans from susanevans.org. I'm all about hands-on learning, and today we are talking about a routine for young children. I have a lot of really fun ideas that I used to do with my kids when they were ages 0 to 4. The reason this topic came up for me is that I was having coffee in a Starbucks with a homeschool mom with 8 kids, and she had a baby and a toddler, and she felt like her baby and her toddler were pulling on her all day, and she was like, what do I do with these kids so that I can homeschool my older kids, because it seems like the majority of my time I'm just dealing with disciplinary issues with the really little ones. And so I said to her that there are many things that you can do with your young kids. One of the things is something that Charlotte Mason calls the habit of focused attention, which means that you teach your kids how to play independently, and that really greatly helps. And I'll show you how to do that on just a minute. Erin, can you tell me if I'm okay? Someone in the chat room is saying that they can't hear the webcast. So, Rosanna, can you hear me now? Yes? Okay. Okay. So, a familiarity is very comforting to young children. If you do your routine of your day in the same order each day, your kids will cry less, unless they're sick or something, but their bodies will become used to doing those different things. They will fight you less to go down for naps and things like that, because they will feel like they've accomplished something during the day. And you can mix up activities, active versus quiet. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Physical versus mental activities, activities with you versus solitary activities. And one of the main things that has worked for me and a lot of other homeschool moms, not just with ages 0 to 4, but with a lot of kids, is that you have a room. Okay, it doesn't have to be a playroom. It could be their bedroom or whatever, that has the potential to put up a gate. So you put up the gate and you teach that young child how to play independently. And I'm going to tell you some tricks that will help to enable that child to do that. Now, one of the things that I did is I created audios. Back then it was cassettes, but now you can speak into a microphone on your computer. All computers have a way for you to record, and so you can record your voice. You can read scripture, or you can recite poetry into an audio. And then what you do is you can cut that onto a CD, or you can play it straight from the computer to your kid. And so my children, ages 0 to 4, were able to memorize huge portions of classical poetry. They could know their numbers from 1 to 100 because I counted on that audio and things like that. And the funny thing is that child, let's say 2-year-old, okay, that 2-year-old who's in that playroom will, or wherever that area is, that 2-year-old will be able to hear your voice, and so they don't feel like they're alone. And so it kind of fools them into thinking that you're there with them. And with that freed up time, you now are able to do what you need to do. Like if there's an important phone call, or if there's an older child that you're homeschooling, or if you want to spend some time with God in Scripture, or just become refreshed and lie down for like 10 minutes. So that can be really super helpful to play that audio with your voice on it. And another thing that I did is I had my my husband say some questions, and I gave some answers, And so they heard questions and answers from both their mom and dad. Okay, yes, it has started. Let's see, click on triangle. Okay. See, I hope Dominica can hear. All right. So, first thing in the morning, there should be a certain way that you do things so that the child knows what they're supposed to do. Now, if all of your children are ages 0 to 4, and if there's one that you nurse, okay, nursing your baby is one of the things that should be on your routine. A lot of babies nurse every 3 hours. I know a lot of people don't like to have their kids on a schedule, and that's fine too. My kids just automatically got hungry about every 3 hours, and so I had that built into my day, so that that first section of 3 hours, I had something scheduled for the kids that they could do, and then the second time like that. There are so many different things that you can do. If you section off something, first thing in the morning is when they're most fresh, okay? So they are bright and cheerful, hopefully. Hopefully they're not all whiny, but they're bright and cheerful. First thing in the morning, they have the most energy, so that is the best time to have independent time for them to play. And what I used to do is I used to spend time with God at that point in the morning, first thing in the morning after breakfast. And so I would play either my voice, or I would play classical music, or I would play educational music like states and capitals and things like that. So they were acquiring information, they were learning. Classical music is really good for the mind of a young child. And so all those things are really, really good. And then you have an open-ended activity. So let me explain a little bit more about what Charlotte Mason calls the habit of focused attention. She says the basis of all learning is the habit of focused attention, and you can teach that to your young kids as young as age 0, probably between 4 months and 6 months. You can teach the habit of focused attention and then give them longer and longer periods of time where they can play independently. When they're that tiny, I would have them maybe in a playpen or something. I didn't actually do that, but I know a lot of people who did, and who it was very good because they were contained, they weren't going to fall down the stairs or whatever, and then you could carry on and do other things that you needed to do. Yes, Monique, a lot of babies, especially when they go through growth spurts, are constantly feeding, so that can be really draining on you physically. I totally understand, and I get that. Now, other things that you can have in your routine that I suggest, even if you're tired, because I remember when my kids were little, I had all 4 of my kids within 5 years, and so I had 4 kids ages 5 and under, and those days were very long. The years were short. Looking back, the years were short, but the days were very long, because when you have young children and you're directing their time, it can take a lot of energy. However, there are some open-ended activities that you can do. Let's talk about sand, for example. There's so many things you can do with sand. Now, don't let sand freak you out. I know you're all foggy, okay? Everybody that comes to this webcast, you've got kids ages 0 to 4. I know you're tired, okay? And you don't have to use sand per se. You could use like cornmeal or flour, anything like that. And you can have them play in it with all kinds of different things. You can have them sift for gold. You can have fake gold coins. Yes, Erin says you can use rice or beans. For some reason, aren't beans like a choking hazard? I've seen that. They're a lot thicker. Yes. There's some things though about sand that you can do that are really, really neat. Like you can do dinosaur digs and stuff like that, especially with 3 and 4-year-olds and things like that. Those can be really fun. I have an hour and a half. I have an hour and a half workshop on, it's called The Wonderful World of Sand and Dirt, that has probably 100 ideas of what you can do with a sand table or in the sand and dirt. Very open-ended activities. And what I want to tell you, okay, that's available on my website, by the way. That's susanevans.org. It's in my e-store. I have a whole section on early childhood on my website because I did a lot with my kids when they were little. I studied early childhood for hundreds of hours, so I'm self-taught in that area, and I'm also a speaker for early childhood conferences. In fact, I just recorded learning centers in early childhood, which was an hour and a half talking about how to set up different learning centers for your kids for ages 0 to 4. Okay, let's get back to the sand, okay? So this is an open-ended thing. What I want you to know is that if they're in a contained area, then the sand doesn't go everywhere. And vacuuming isn't that hard unless you have a really old-fashioned vacuum cleaner that's like a dinosaur, like really heavy. But if you have a modern vacuum cleaner, it's not that hard to vacuum a room. It takes like 5 minutes, okay? So don't be scared if sand goes everywhere, because the sand that you have nowadays, like you buy washed sand, the kid stands up and all the sand falls off. Okay, yes, it can get in the diaper. Oh, I don't like the moon sand either. Yes, I don't. Yeah. Well, I talk about different textures of sand in my other workshop, where you need thinner kinds of sand in order to build sand castles and stuff like that. But there are certain places that you can find it for free. Well, like the beach, for example, or volleyball courts that are in a city and things like that. If you have a deck or patio area, they can play with it out there. Yes, Erin, thank you. Actually, if you don't want to have sand indoors, you could do that outside. That's a very good point. The reason I say inside is because sand is one of those things that I did with my kids when they were 0 to 4. They were so quiet for like a whole hour, and they didn't fight. And I had like 4 kids that were all tiny. Okay, that's like a miracle. Like, I mean, it's so worth doing. And sand isn't that expensive. I mean, you can get it like for $5 for a big, huge bag, and you can put it in a bin like under a bed or something like that. Or a kiddie pool, yes, in a kiddie pool outside, or inside even, you could, and if you have somewhere to store it. Now, I had an indoor sandbox for 5 years, yes, one that you could sit in. So yeah, I was a little bit brave that way. But definitely one of the best things that you can do with children ages 0 to 4 that is open-ended is with sand, and they're quiet, they're happy, their minds are engaged, and you can teach science to your older kids, or you can lie down and rest or be refreshed or go read a book or something to refresh you so that you're a wonderful wife when your husband comes home. You can become refreshed. You don't have to be pulled on continuously by your children. And like I said, it's not that hard to clean up. You just vacuum it. Okay? Water table. This can also have to do with water. Now, being a homeschool mom, I do most of my water activities, or I did, ages 0 to 4, in the bathtub because it's self-contained. But then you have to obviously be in there. But you're in there anyway if your kids are really small. Salt dough in a bin with cookie cutters and stamps and shapes. Thank you, Erin. Those are great ideas. You can use salt dough. That's another thing, is you can do Play-Doh. Play-Doh is another open-ended activity. I wouldn't do it at age 0 because they put it in their mouth. but it depends on the child. Some babies don't put stuff in their mouth all the time, and so you can do it at younger ages, but they like pressing something into the Play-Doh. It makes it very easy for them to work with, just like almost like rubber stamps kind of into the Play-Doh. So yes, Play-Doh is another open-ended activity that they can do. Nothing trumps sand, though, which is why I mentioned that first. Okay, now water play, if you have like a 3 or 4-year-old, they could do water play at the sink. They can fill up the kitchen sink and then have different funnels, and you can tint the water like a blue color or something and have them play with measuring cups or with turkey basters where you suck up the blue and then deposit the blue into another container. I've seen kids, like a 2-year-old, very happy and quiet, putting all of the blue water from one to the other with a big turkey baster. And they love seeing the blue water go up and then go down, and they're squirting it like that. So yes. Let's see, step 2, sell sand and water table. Okay, yes, so you can, but you don't even have to buy anything as far as sand and, well, with sand you do, but as far as water, like I said, you can use whatever you have already. You can make little boats and things out of materials that you have, and put them in a sink or in the bathtub. And I have a whole 1-hour audio called Bath Time Fun, which has 49 ideas for homeschoolers for water play. And they're almost all of them are educational, either geography or history or different things like that. Like we did 3 boats, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, when we studied Christopher Columbus. And then my 3 boys, who were very, very little, raced the boats across the bathtub. And so we went, and we couldn't touch it. So we had to, like, you know, blow on it or whatever to get it to go across the bathtub. So we had races and things like that. There's a lot of really fun things that you can do with water play. Okay, now there's tons of toys, of course, that you own already. What I recommend in establishing a routine with your young children is that you rotate out toys. I know a lot of you already do that, and that is good. If you have everything out, okay, like I have been to people's houses who have a playroom for their young kids, and every single toy is out, okay? That causes habituation in the mind of the child so that they no longer consider those toys attractive. So what it's kind of like the 4 seasons, where you have winter and then suddenly it's spring and it's fresh and different, and so you feel all happy and like something is different. So that is what I recommend, is to keep things in different bins and then rotate them out and take them out one at a time. That way they only see them during that certain section of time. Okay, now let me talk a little bit about routines versus schedules. A schedule is more rigid. A routine is just an order of things that you do. Okay, so if the kid is used to doing something quiet first thing in the morning, then they're always used to being quiet first thing in the morning. Once you train them that they're going to be playing either on their own, or if you have like two young kids and they play together quietly while they're listening to an audio of your voice, then they'll automatically do that, and they'll be happy. They'll be happy because right after breakfast we play quietly, and then they hear the same thing. Okay, I played the same audio each morning, and my 2-year-old recited word perfect a Shakespearean sonnet. Didn't understand a word of it, but he knew classical literature, okay? And what they learn when they're tiny becomes a part of who they are and what they treasure and what they consider comforting and familiar. So that is something that you, whatever it is that you value, like scripture, my kids could quote huge portions of scripture at ages 2 and 3. It was incredible, and it was no work at all. all they did was they were listening to that first thing in the morning every day, and so they were able to do that. You can also play Spanish audios where they can learn a different language, or French, or whatever it is that you want them to learn. There's so much that you can do, but if you play a little bit of classical music, if you play something and not have it stark quiet. A lot of kids stark quiet. They're wanting mommy or whatever, and so they'll start screaming. The trick to get them to start playing independently is to have your voice in that machine, and then their brain is used to listening to that Shakespearean sonnet. Their brain is used to listening to Psalm 23. Their brain is used to listening to whatever it is that you're doing on the cassette, and that hour goes by really fast. Yes, I had my kids, ages 0 to 4, could play independently for a full hour, and it wasn't just with sand. I occasionally had to come in and switch things over, like halfway point, like for 30 minutes. But any open-ended activity, once you train them to work longer and longer periods, they're able to pay closer attention. That carries over. The habit of focused attention carries over to other areas of learning. And if you're watching this on the homeschool channel, that is, if you are homeschooling your kids, that is something that you want in your children, to be able to learn, to be able to focus. And then when you're reading a book to them, for example, they can focus for a longer period of time on the book you're reading. When you're talking about God, they're able to focus on what you're saying more, because you have trained them for longer and longer periods of time to be able to pay attention. At the preschool my oldest went to, they rotated the toys every month. It was exciting to see what was new on Monday morning that they got switched out. Yes. Okay. Yes, another thing that you can do for a routine for your kids is you can have, okay, so quiet activities and then louder activities, not necessarily loud, but like physical activities versus mental. Let's just say, for example, that you are, okay, so first thing in the morning you have breakfast, then you put in your audio, and you take out something open-ended, like, let's say, large lacing beads, whatever it is that you already have in your house. You take out something like that for them to play with while they're listening to the thing that they are very familiar with. So it's very comforting for that 2-year-old or whatever to listen to that whole hour or half hour or however long you want it to be, while they're playing and their hands are busy. So they're used to playing quietly at that point. And then when that is finished, when that cassette is over, then you can play one-on-one with them for about 5 minutes at least, because they like to check in with you. That's another thing. If you have a lot of kids that you're homeschooling, pay attention to your youngest first. Make sure you look them in the eye, tickle them, connect with them for 5 minutes. 5 minutes is really a substantial time. Relax and have them bond with you, so they feel like they've connected to you first thing in the morning, so they don't feel like you're neglecting them. You're not. To be refreshed, you are building into them habits of playing on their own and learning all this stuff from the audio, and it frees you up for all these other things. And sometimes, like, you're cooking or something else and you have to have that. So don't feel that is bad in any way, shape, or form. We've never had anything. It's always been good. The kids are quiet because, well, they're not necessarily quiet. Well, with Sandy, we're actually, when they're busy and when there's an audio, they don't talk over it because they want to hear it. See, that's another trick about having an audio. Let's see, attention span is my son's biggest delay, so I need to implement some of this again. I used to do a lot of this before he was 2, but stopped once we got busy with occupational therapy and speech therapy. Yeah, Monique. Yes, very good. You could play audios in the car on the way. Yes, that could happen. Good. Anyways, okay, so first thing in the morning, they're doing a mental activity, and it is quiet. So I suggest that at the end of that audio, when it's finished, that's always when I turn to the next activity, and I would either be with them for the next half hour to do something one-on-one with them to actually teach something. I know a lot of people are anti-teaching of young kids, and I am the opposite. I think that their minds are so ready to take in information and at least read books to them and just enjoy telling them about animals and different things like that. Just bring joy to, I mean, everything, ages 0 to 4, everything they're discovering for the first time. So there's a sense of wonder. And I love those years because there's that sense of wonder. Teach them something. The other thing is that we had, for about a year, we had a mini trampoline that was a small trampoline that was in a ball pit. Normally it costs like over $100. We got it at a yard sale for $20. And so what they did was they would jump on the trampoline for like 5 minutes or something. And so that gets their energy out, so that they did a mental activity and then they did a physical activity. Another thing you can do is turn on some praise music or some upbeat music and dance around with your kids. Once you get your energy going, you have your adrenaline that goes up. And that adrenaline clears your mind, and it helps the child to be able to think more clearly. You know how when you exercise you feel better? It's the same with kids. So it's good to have some sort of physical activity built into the morning, especially for ages 0 to 4, where boys, especially with boys, they need some outlet so that they don't feel like they're always doing quiet activities. They'll look to you like they have cabin fever, okay? They'll stand on their heads, they'll start screaming or whatever. So you need to have some sort of physical thing built into the day as well. You can just tumble around with them or tickle them and go all over, romping. My husband's really good at that with the boys. Whenever my husband came back from work, the kids would pile on top of them. And so roughhousing is something that boys really thrive on as well. Living books are wonderful for this age. Oh, yes, and there's so many classics that are really good to read to your kids. So in your routine for your young children, I would definitely recommend having some sort of reading during the day. And if you feel like you're never doing anything with your young kids because you have older kids, just reading one book, it only takes 5 minutes. So if you write down what you're going to do, and you even have your kid could even go pick the book and come up to you, and then you can read to them, and that can be a wonderful part of your routine as well. So, and what I should have said at the beginning of this is what I said in my webinar back in January. Here on the Homeschool Channel, I did a webinar about organizing your homeschool through prayer. And I talked about how to pray for each of your children and what God would have you do in the schedule of each of your children. And that applies to ages 0 to 4, and that is the foundation of doing things right, okay? So what I would do is in the summer, preparing for the next fall, I would pray about each child, including the tiny ones. And one of the things that you do is you ask God what are some of the deficiencies in their character that need to be addressed, and those you can work into your routine, believe it or not. For example, obedience training. If your child doesn't obey you instantly, jump up and immediately obey. Like if you say come, and they don't come, then what you could do is, no, it doesn't have to be like a drill sergeant, but it's a game, okay? In your living room, you can have your child you say, come, and then they run to you and you hug them. And then, okay, go to the other side of the room. Okay, ready? Come, and then they can run to you. Okay, so you're training them to come when you tell them to come. This was especially important when I trained my kids for no and stop. Okay, let's say stop. Oh my goodness, I learned this the hard way. One of my second son was very strong-willed when he was a baby and toddler. He no longer is, because I put so much training into him that now he's one of my easiest kids. But anyway, but back when he was 2, he ran across the parking lot of a supermarket, and he almost got run over by a car, and I said, stop, and he didn't stop. And that, okay, it matters if your kids obey you or not. It's not just a matter of, you know, well, they need to be under the authority of God. Your child does not rule. God rules, and you have been put in authority over your children, and so you rule your children. And when your children are obedient, they bring rest to your soul, and you have more energy to do more fun stuff for them. So it's self-serving to them. Of course, they're too young to understand that probably, but you understand as a mother that you have more energy whenever they're not draining you all the time. So one of the things, one time I prayed, God, what would you have me put into the routine for this child? And that came up, that I needed to do obedience training. And so I did obedience training at like 10 o'clock in the morning every day. It was only 5 minutes. It doesn't take that long. It doesn't cost any money whatsoever. And I would have all the kids, even the other, you know, the other ones that were obeying just fine, I would have them run around the room, and then when I said stop, not yelling. If I just said the word stop quietly, they would immediately stop, like they would freeze. And we did it so many times. If you want, you can make it into a game, or you give them M&Ms or something like that. You can if you want. For young, very young children, praise is usually enough. Like when my kids ran to me and when I said come and they ran to me and I go, good job, that was enough, and I didn't have to, like, you know, give anything like that, prizes. But when you're training, that made such a huge difference that I actually trained. I spent time training for them to obey the word stop. Okay, so then when my youngest was still a baby, I was holding her in my arms. My oldest was 5, and then I had a 3.5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And these 3 boys, we were at some river with my husband's boss, and my husband's boss was going down to the river to his boat, and we were going to get on his boat with him. And as we started going, my 3 boys ran ahead of my husband and his boss. And I said, I didn't yell or anything, I just said the word stop, and all 3 abruptly stopped. And the boss was so impressed with my husband that his children were so well trained, because they were so tiny with their tiny little noses, and they're obviously normal kids. They were running and wah-hoo, you know, but they abruptly stopped. Just, you know, they were halfway stepping and they immediately stopped. So what I'm saying is character training pays off if you build that into your day. And for young children, they need to learn that. The 2 things is obedience and self-control. Those are the 2 things. And for some kids, self-control is always an issue. And God has put that into them. And so that's just something that they do. Okay. Now, you have activities that are solitary versus activities with you, activities that are quiet versus activities that are active, mental activities versus physical activities. And when you have something that is the same way that you do things each day, That sense of familiarity gives comfort to the child, especially young children ages 0 to 4. And so the point is to help your young children to progress with their lives in their understanding of God, in skills that they will use for the rest of their lives, and in their knowledge of the world around them. There's no reason to hold them back and do nothing with them all day. Most of the stuff I've said to you takes only 5 minutes. Even the messiest things, well, I didn't talk about art activities. I have on my website art activities for early childhood. I have 2 hours of art activities that only take like 5 or 10 minutes and don't take very much work. That's on my website, susanevans.org. In my e-store, there's a whole lot of stuff in there. But a lot of these things that you can do with your kids only takes about 5 minutes. So you could do some of those things and then have open-ended activities that the kids can do while you're working with other with your other kids, especially when you're homeschooling, because you need to get stuff done. Each day should be fresh and filled with interesting activities, so they wake up in the morning with a sense of anticipation that life is good, that they're going to learn something new today, and so they have that happy feeling when they get up in the morning. You will notice that if you have a structure to your day, you will feel like you're a better mother, your children will be happier, and you will also have more free time because your child will be occupied with fabulous activities. And this concludes my session. Are there any questions before we go off the air about a routine for young children? I did mention that when all my children were ages 0 to 4, I had a routine in the morning. In the afternoon, I often had open-ended, like more of a not so much rigid routine, so that we could have more open-ended things that like go to the grocery store and things like that. So you don't have to have a routine in your whole day, but I recommend it strongly for the morning hours so that you get a lot done in your day. You as a mother can get a lot more done in your day. Just laundry and all kinds of stuff. And include your children, your young children, in your chores and your laundry and doing things like that. I always have my kids with me to do those things so that they can learn how to do them and learn that that's a part of life. What resources do you recommend for character training? The Bible. I would definitely recommend the Bible. And I would do, like I just said, character training that, like having them come to me. I would pray and ask God what character quality my child needs, and then pray and ask God, how do I do that? And open your heart to God, and God will put those ideas in your mind. I don't use a specific character training curriculum. I don't. I also use my husband. I say, this particular child has this character quality that is lacking, and so can you brainstorm with me how we could do that? And he sometimes prays with me, and then we have either he has an idea or I have an idea, and we implement that with our children. So thank you so much for coming and watching this. I have 6 products for early childhood on my website, susanevans.org. It's under early childhood. At the very bottom, you can find an icon that says early childhood. Click on it. I put everything on one page for you so that you can see it. I have lots of free articles with lots of ideas, tons more ideas than I could cover in half hour here. And yes, and I just recorded one that I haven't uploaded. The Learning Centers one should be in my e-store within the next few weeks. So thank you so much for coming.